guess we've got quite a few of us. There's still people pouring in, as Stephen mentioned. So yes, that's the topic we're going to present today, Digital Enterprise and Organisational Agility. Let's just quickly introduce ourselves.
So I'm Jonathan Elliot. I head up two different activities within TCS. So I head up what's called the Digital Enterprise, and I also head up the global, the transformation, Digital Enterprise and the overall transformation piece as well for the consulting arm of TCS. Most of my time is spent with senior execs, a lot of which comes from across financial services, retail, and telco media, but we also do an increasing amount of work in public sector on this theme as well.
Hi, and my name is Manav Mehan, and I had what is called the Agile practice, or we call it the System and Software Engineering, because we don't actually look at Agile on its own. At the very least, we look at Agile and Lean, and quite often it's actually clubbed together with CMMI, Six Sigma as a process improvement method. I've been with TCS for about 2.5 years now in the consulting practice, and had a life before that. I'd not say it might be career limiting if I say I'll have a life after that, but clearly I think I've worked with Microsoft, Yahoo, and I've had a lot of digital experience myself. So when we thought about presenting here, we thought, okay, well, let's draw parallels from what is a well-known industry. We hopefully used it quite well into the session today. And you'll see the bit at the bottom today, which I've been asked in every presentation to quote until 7th of November, because I might not with any of those two, but at least nominated for the Best Agile Coach and Mentor and the Valuable Player for what is known as UK Agile Awards. It's a suits event, actually quite interesting. So if you haven't been there, have a look. It's interesting.
So TCS, before I started working for TCS, I'd never even heard of the company. And a headhunter called me and said, do you want to go and work for TCS? And I said, who are they? They must be very small. And he said, they're not really. They're 275,000 people. They're growing at 25% year on year. And you can see from here, they've been around for 45 years. We're a part of what's called the Tata & Sons group. Tata & Sons do everything. We own Jaguar Land Rover. We own Tetley's Tea. And then we own the small consultancy services of 275,000 people. So you can see within that, a pretty broad set of clients. We tend to work with large clients, and that's not good or bad. I'm kind of just explaining the way it is. And it reflects on the bottom line. This 98.6% of our revenues come from repeat customers. And when you think that the business is growing at 30% year on year, that's actually saying you've got to have be working for some pretty big customers and getting some real headroom there. So that's the kind of space that we play in.
I think it's quite interesting when we go into lots of organizations to explain what we do. It's not just an IT company. It's not just a systems integrator. Actually, a lot of it runs in the blood. I was planning to bring in a Jaguar or Land Rover here, which I couldn't do. So I thought I'll just show the Tetley tea. So what you have been drinking outside, it's a Tata Enterprise. Although I think Jonathan mentioned it's probably made somewhere up in Yorkshire. So never mind. There's a connect there.
So what we're going to cover today, we started off talking about, you've clearly got two different skill sets up here, and yet they overlap in quite a significant way. We're going to talk about the digital age, and for us, that in some ways is a proxy for the future of an enterprise. When we talk about what good looks like for an enterprise 3, 4, 5 years down the road, we start applying a lot of thinking around, is it digitally enabled? And I'm going to talk you through that in some detail. But equally, digital is an age of disruption. The whole world is changing, and I'm going to talk you through some of the trends that we see there and the way the ecosystem's been reconfigured. But behind that, we actually think it's being enabled by at least two different things. So we have a view that disruption is technology-enabled. We're going to talk about social, mobile, big data, and cloud. But we also have a view that it's methodologies such as Agile that are actually allowing all this evolution to take place. We're going to touch on both of those. When we talk to our clients about transformation in the digital age, one of the first questions is, what are we actually transforming? What are we here to do? And the answer is that we try to work with our clients to help them, certainly in the private sector, to make more money. And we describe that process as a business model. A business model is how you make money. And we'll talk you through how we see that and what we need to do to create an agile business model. So we're going to take you through that, a little bit of transformation of business models. And this whole idea that it's very easy to create something that's different and to create value for a customer, but to do it in a durable fashion gets a little bit trickier. And it gets a lot trickier because people can simply either replicate what you're doing or they can out-innovate you and sort of out-compete on that basis. So we're going to come back and take a look at how you actually build agility into your business model so that you can continue to evolve and out-compete on a durable basis. Then we're going to drop into the Agile best practice piece. So I'll give you our thoughts on 5 or 6 things that we think are pretty cool and pretty key. And then finally try to just summarize and relink the messages that you've seen at the top. In terms of Q&A, there is a separate session, a panel session happening after this. So I think we'll probably take the questions after on the panel. If there's something that's completely unintelligible, you can always stop us and we'll try and explain it. But otherwise, we'll pick it up towards the end. Okay? So I started off, and I've just talked about this digital age being the digital being a proxy for the future of the enterprise, and equally digital being some sort of proxy for transformation. And clearly the very first piece of thinking that we do with our clients is actually around their purpose, their positioning. What are they there to do? Why do they exist as an organization? And in fact, that leads us to start attacking some of the bigger questions around ecosystems. Where do they play? What is it they want to do within that ecosystem? And that ecosystem is changing significantly. So we see things like traditional revenues are declining for a huge number of player types. There aren't that many industries, certainly those that have been, like telco that's been around for more than 10 years. The core business is in decline. I think with some of the internet businesses that have only been around, maybe like the Amazons for less, you'll find that their core business is pretty healthy. But for a lot of clients, that's not the case. So you're finding that these value chains are being reconfigured. If they're not using technology well, they're often finding their cost base is going up, certainly compared to competition. And another thing that's going along is that customers are becoming much more demanding. And I think I can actually give some examples of that. But if we take a look at the consumer world, there's I don't know whether anyone's ever heard of a chap called Dave Carroll. I met with Dave a couple of years back, and he had been on a plane. He'd been on a United Airline plane, and he'd looked out the window and he'd seen someone throwing his guitar. In fact, just throwing all the bags out of the hold onto the tarmac because the little chariot that comes along to collect them, wasn't there. And he looked out and he just suddenly saw his guitar case flying through the air, and he thought, yeah, that's not great. It's quite an expensive guitar. And lo and behold, as soon as he got it when he went into the airport, he discovered it was broken. So he went and complained to the desk, and United Airlines said, we don't care, and he complained to somebody else, and they said, give us a phone call, and he called them, was put on hold for an hour, and 5 weeks later, nothing had happened at all. So you just got one guy, broken guitar, and you say, so what? Well, he's a singer. So he decided he was going to fix this by making a song. So he wrote a song, and then he put it on YouTube, and then people started watching, and it was all about how United breaks guitars. That was the song. Right? It was a very funny song, very entertaining. United Airlines lost 10% share value in a week because of that one video, right? And the stock market, the equity analysts suddenly perceived that not only was the quality of service poor within United Airlines, but in fact that other people were now aware that the quality of service was poor. So there are a number of trends in here and which really start talking about a customer being far more empowered, far more informed. And a customer has a lot of power now that they wouldn't have had in the old days over some of the organizations. Clearly, there's a whole lot of legacy problems out there, financial constraints. If you're in some sectors like financial services, there's a massive amount of regulation that's actually increasing the cost base, amongst other things. So there are all these drivers going along. And we kind of say, well, you can see some of them up here. That there is a fundamental restructuring of economies going on. And just to pull it back now, so what does that mean for TCS? We believe that in our world, I guess we are in the IT and the services business, but we do believe that technology has a part to play in all that restructuring and disruption. And our view is that there are 4 technologies that are underpinning that. So we talk about mobile being the face of engagement. We talk about social, which is being the means of engagement. Big data, which is all around creating insight and analytics. And cloud, which is all about virtualization. And I'll come back to that in a little bit, but I'm trying to say that for us, we actually believe that those 4 things are so fundamental that any business that's out there today that isn't really mobilizing either its workforce or its employees is missing a trick. Any company out there that is still going to be using email, my 14-year-old son doesn't use email. It's a strange concept. My 17-year-old daughter does. My 14-year-old they don't use email. It's dead. It's finished. For them, it's all about Facebook. It's about find information when you want it. It's not about get a hold of the stuff in your inbox that's not relevant, that you actually think is really cool but not relevant to today, so you file it somewhere. So the whole way of searching and finding and accessing information, deriving insight, actionable insight, is being changed. And underneath that, you've got this big data piece, which says that in fact, you've got all that information, but some of it's what we call structured and unstructured. Structured is the stuff you've typed into databases. Unstructured is the kind of stuff that people are tweeting about, blogging about. It's the insurance claims forms where people write stuff down, but it's actually, you don't quite know where to put it in the database, but you've got all this information. So how do you use that? How do you make sense out of it? And there's a lot of work that's going on with that. So we'll come back a little bit, but what I'm really just recapping here is that we think that the digital technologies of today are actually fundamentally helping to reconfigure these value chains and these economies. But there's another part to it, which is the methodologies that link them all together, in which case...
So I'll just give a couple of examples on that one. As you were saying there, Jonathan, it reminded me. I used to work with Microsoft quite a lot, and one example was one good friend there, Vincent. I think Microsoft was one of the organizations who pioneered the initial sort of servers, which could you put it at home, media center, effectively. And I remember when he's saying, hey, my daughter, 7-year-old daughter, went to someone else's house, and she looked at this round thing and said, Daddy, what is this? That was actually a DVD. Because they'd scanned all the DVDs into their media center, and they had no DVDs or CDs at all at their home. So it's quite funny when kids go into the other houses and actually look at these funny sort of things. And the other good example at that time was, as I think in the morning keynote, the speaker mentioned about, Stephen actually mentioned about Nintendo Wii. Nintendo Wii actually came out after Xbox 360 was around for a long time, because they always think their market, their segmentation, is actually around serious gamers. And they had Project Nadal, which had the technology of those cameras and identification of the individual in front of cameras 14 years prior, before they released the Xbox Kinect. So there are some of those disruptive things to keep an eye on the digital movement. As Jonathan mentioned, so for me, the other side of the picture is around the methodology, or the agility, if we can call it. Now, I've been around Agile blocks for more than a decade now, and as you guys would appreciate, Agile is not something new. It's a package of good practices. It's a package of iterative and incremental ways of doing things. I think even the manifesto itself has been over 12 years now, and it's certainly crossed the chasm. So if you look at the way the chasm, or the way the early majority to sort of late majority side works together, is people who are innovators tend to be sort of more on that side, the early adopters, and it gets to mainstream when you get into the majority. Now, what you'll find is a lot of people who are risk adverse, a lot of people who don't want to be the guinea pigs of trying this new iOS 7 and see how it actually works, they would tend to be in the latter half of it. And we work with a lot of these guys. Now, initially, when Agile came about, there was a lot of sort of web startup company mentality where 5 or 7 people co-located will hash something together, get it out there. What we're seeing is increasingly banking and financial services, who I would absolutely put down on the right-hand side, are the ones who are asking for agile transformation. Now, that doesn't mean that their agile is the same as what we used to do back in Yahoo and Microsoft days, but essentially they're looking for those traits of getting out there quickly, responding to customer needs quickly, and getting a product and service out there which meets that customer demand. So clearly, if at all there was any doubt, Agile has certainly crossed the chasm. It is mainstream. A survey which comes out every year from version 1 tries to measure the agile-ness of the delivery functions in particular. Now, that's the only one which comes out and does this sort of detailed analysis. And the results for the last 7 years have been very similar, very consistent. And this year, they came out with some lovely pictures, which I've just put them out there for you. So 90% of people do think that Agile gives them the facility, the ability to respond to changing nature of the business. So on one hand, we're seeing the digital causing this disruption, but long and behold, Agile is there to help accelerate that change and embodying that change, making sure that we can deliver against that. And actually, a whole lot of people, around 70% as per this survey, do think things get delivered faster. Now, that's not to say the throughput increases, or if you measure velocity, that is dramatically increased. That's not the point. It is about the concept to cash life cycle, which is shortened. And for me, in our personal experiences, it's not because of we can do things quicker. It's actually around prioritizing the right things, getting the focus right, let people collaborate, empower people to deliver on that agile message. It's further expanded out on another visual from the same survey, where actually look at acceleration of time to market is the top one, changing priorities is the next one, and cost is further down. Okay, there are things around engineering discipline and distributed team. I don't quite agree with that because we work very well across the shores. We've got heavily distributed teams. But then important thing here is that cost, which is often seen as a key driver. We get into a lot of discussions where we say, okay, why are you wanting to go agile? What does it actually mean for you? For a lot of people, it's just simply reduction in cost. That should not be the first goal, and certainly not the only goal, which we do get across quite a bit. And for me, ROI is the numerator, which is value, divided by the denominator, cost. Now, a lot of organizations, even on their process improvement change journey, find it too difficult to measure the value, so let's just measure the cost. One of the key things which try and embody and embed in a transformation is focusing on the value and the flow of the value. We are not there yet, clearly. Another section of this particular survey, and again, this is publicly available. You can just put it into a search engine like Yahoo, Bing, and it's a I can't remember the third one, which I'm sure you guys know. I still got quite a bit of stocks in Yahoo, so there's a level of affinity there. I think the important point this part of the survey points to is that we do not look at the organizational change. We do not take people along on how will the PMO work with us, how will the business engage with us, how will the IT open its sort of visibility window, if you like, and it's no more black box things, okay, we give something and something comes out at the other end. I think what this part of the survey is pointing is there is still a need for us to consider this as a holistic change, for us to understand where we are today, what parts of agility it will apply to us. Is it just around roles? Is it just around principles? Is it just around values? Or is it around using a Kanban lean style work? Is it more on Scrum and Agile? There's lots of variants. So if you haven't figured out for yourselves, I would absolutely encourage you to see what flavor of Agile and what degree of agility do you want in your organization, in your particular business area. And my solution, we thought long and hard about this. I think one thing which I'm going to introduce now will probably align it well for us, and that is Agile Insight. Now, we, again, researched a little bit about this. And we thought, okay, what are we trying to do? It's actually baking that agility into the organization. And we started to think, how could we do that? So actually, no one else has used this term before, so that's pretty good. Not that we know of when we put it into search engines. I think it's all about the outer circle is very much of a Deming cycle, the way we describe Agile, or we would like to think of it in a very holistic way. It's around planning things, what we want to do. So it's not on day one there was product backlog. No, on day one there was no product backlog, because why would you need a product backlog? What is the vision? What is the business case? What's the problem we are trying to solve before we start cranking the handles and delivering? So that's one part, and then trying it out from a do, check, learn from the feedback loops, and act how would we do things differently. Essentially, for me to wrap it all around is think of how we can bake the agility into the organization. How can we ensure Agile is almost like in our DNA, it is the nervous system which controls us all. It is a microprocessor, or as the Intel has said, Intel Inside. That's what it brings it all together. There'll be a lot of transformation. There'll be a lot of business areas around. Think of Agile Insight.
So I spoke earlier of this idea that from my perspective, when I meet clients, we're trying to help them make more, let's say, make more money, certainly in the private sector. Public sector could be something slightly different. So when we go about attacking that question, we actually start trying to dissect their business model. For us, that is described basically that they make money by doing 4 things. They've got to have some customers, the people they sell to. They've got to have something that they buy, let's call those offers. They've got to have an operational capability that allows them to make and service whatever that offer is. And finally, increasingly important is this notion of they've got to be able to partner. They've got to be able to decide what's core business, what's not core, and therefore who to work with. So by trying to say that this durable value creation means that you're going to have to continually innovate. It's not you do it once and you're fine for 10 years anymore. That world's finished. You do it once, you're ahead of the competition. You've got to constantly think about how to improve. Is that essence of agility? How would you measure whether it's successful? Well, you can see some of the typical measures up there. On the customer side, a lot of people net promoter score. So are our customers happy? Are they recommending us to other people? How much are our customers worth, the lifetime value? On the office side, typical question might be, help me improve my margin, my contribution. The operations side, we've talked a little bit about time to market. It's a very key thing. And equally, if you go into the partner and ecosystems, a lot of it's around freeing up working capital. So they're the kind of questions that are coming in. You meet a client that says, I've got a working capital issue, and you're kind of saying, well, okay, but stand back and say, well, what's that got to do with agility? Well, it has everything to do with agility, because at the end of the day, we have a series of digital tools if we go back to those technology enablers, that we actually now bake into the kind of value creators that we put in front of our clients. Let me give you some examples of these. On the customer side, there's a huge shift now towards real-time segmentation of customers, personalization, truly understanding who your customers are, what behavior they have. A great source of information of this is, in fact, the social data as well. It's amazing how much insight we glean from tracking what people think about Barclays on the way to the bank. They're all excited about asking for a new loan. They get into the bank and they start tweeting saying, stuck in a queue, don't like the carpets. And then they come out saying, I didn't get any loan at all, really unhappy. It's astonishing how much insight you can get now from those additional, what we call unstructured data sources that allow you to personalize and segment your customers differently. Very much in a more real-time thing. We know you're in a bank, boom, we're going to send you an offer by text or Bluetooth or whatever. On the office side, rapid prototyping and gamification, this idea of how do we get gamification is all about how do you get people to actually participate during their customer journey. So it's not just about we're going to try and move you through our web channel and we're going to try and offer you this, this, and this. It's more we need feedback from you. We need to learn more about you as you go through it so that we can better segment you, better personalize the offers that we're putting to you. And we can get offers to you very quickly that are this kind of crowdsourcing. Lots of other people create ideas. It's not just you, your R&D department, but your customers are part of your R&D now. They're telling you what they want and need. So how are you capturing that? On the operations side, I think if I just pick up on this analytics-based process, we talk about insight at the edge. And I think, again, that's key to this whole agility thing, which is how do you really understand what's going on with all your stakeholders? How do you actually get that insight and then turn that into actions that says, I have some piece of data now that tells me that the customers are behaving like this, or that my suppliers are behaving like that. There's lots of fascinating cases now where you're probably going to find out that your supplier is about to go bankrupt when they've gone bankrupt. Whereas the reality is they're going to stop paying their suppliers pretty quickly when they run out of cash, and their suppliers are going to start complaining on the web or tweeting saying, haven't been paid by so-and-so. In fact, there are loads and loads of data sources now that actually allow you to understand your partner base far better than you ever could before. External systems of engagement, at the end of the day, how do you integrate all these other parties into your business? And we have a massive, we happen within TCS to be running the biggest internal social kind of intranet, but social context intranet in the world. And trying to learn from that to truly understand how do we actually get all these other people to participate and guide us and learn from that. So we need to be able to be agile and by better understanding and responding to our customers, by making sure that we're able to rapid prototype. We don't get stuck in these big, perfect products that are so late to market that somebody else has stolen the marketplace by then. We've got to be agile in the sense of understanding, using analytics to detect, measure, drive change, and convert that into some sort of insight that we can actually action, and not just we have a bit of data, but we've got to find out the so what. And equally, we've got to make sure that when we talk about agility, it's all our partners are coming with us. And this wonderful, scary word, co-opetition, where it actually means we're competing and cooperating with the same person. So, one day, I can think that, well, I won't name them, but we might be partnering with another consultancy because we have a collective offering. The following day, we're competing head-on with them on a particular pitch. So how do you cope with that, and how do you get these systems engagement that allow us all to act together? So, the kind of things that we've done, and I'm very happy to talk you through them later, but customers, there's a whole, British Airways, if you walk onto British Airways now, I don't know whether you've noticed, but I've had the experience where one of the flight attendants walks up and says, "Hello, Mr. Elliot, we think," and they got it wrong, but they said, "Here's your vegetarian meal." And in fact, I hadn't ordered a vegetarian meal, but they got my name right, so that was kind of half right, half wrong. But we actually developed all the apps that actually allow now all these people to access that information on the customer real time, just on an iPad, as opposed to not knowing who I am. Equally, if we go through the offers and channels, we develop all the mobile apps for Barclays, and in fact, I think the Barclays Ping It is known to us. The bad news is it's the app that took us the longest to develop of all the mobile apps we've ever developed in the world. And we developed using Agile methodology, and it took us 5 months. And that's when you actually think about the complexity and the security issues involved in terms of having an app that allows you to get into banking. And you can't just throw something out there that people hack into and steal all the money out of your account from. Is in fact, we meet a lot of customers that say the longest app you ever took to develop from beginning to end was 5 months. It's actually, it's not so bad. So there's a lot of learning around how we do that. Maybe I'll stop there. There's some other cool things around Ferrari and simulators for Formula One drivers, but I'll take that with you if you want to come back to me afterwards on one by one. So again, we are talking about agility across these 4 dimensions, and we're using not just agile methodologies, but we really, truly sit down and think about how to detect and react to that change. How do we use mobile to mobilize the workforce? How do we use big data to actually make actionable insight out of all the data that's out there? How do we use social to actually allow everyone to collaborate and redesign their own roles rapidly? So there's a lot of stuff that goes into creating agile organizations, and they're just some of the examples. So at the end of the day, I guess there's another way of viewing it, which is to say it's actually not about technology, it's about the benefits of technology. So we've introduced these 2 different disruptors, technologies and methodologies. You've seen the mobile, social, big data, and cloud, and we've talked about the agile inside. But in fact, at the end of the day, when we sit down, and I sit down with my customers and talk around, this is your enterprise strategy, this is your digital vision, this is your transformation initiative, whatever, they all come under this kind of different wording. But some of the core questions, the 5 core questions that I pretty well have to ask myself on every single client, with every client that I'm sitting down is, are you really, in order to create that agility, in order to detect and respond to change in the way that Darwin saw evolution, are you building systems that allow you to engage well? Are you creating and actioning insight? Are you really thinking about sustainable innovation? Is everyone able to collaborate? And at the end of the day, without those, the agility piece really becomes a little bit of a not very powerful tool, to be honest. Agility requires all the other stuff as well. It's no good being able to detect change if you can't act. It's no good having all these people working together in new value chains if they can't collaborate. It's no good, doing a one-off incremental innovation and thinking, yippee, I've done it, nobody's going to catch up. So we tend to really focus very much on these not metrics, but drivers of value creation on the right-hand side.
Absolutely, Jonathan. So I think clearly a lot of us would have seen examples of Agile done not so correctly. And I think this is a great insight into how Agile can be a holistic change. It can be a journey to the end and not the end itself. For the next set of section, I think in the interest of time, I'll take it a very quick approach for the next few slides, because these are the examples of how we would run some of the transformation programs. So you'll see the Patterson-Corner model here, where essentially it's a 3-step at the very least, the 3-step roadmap which we get involved into. Now, you might see that you've used various kind of transformation approaches. For us, I think what we're baking in here is around a regular assessment or understanding of how well we are improving. And quite often we get involved at the people, process, technology side of things at the very highest levels, but then we have a lot of information underneath that, a lot of qualitative information, but equally a lot of quantitative information to understand where the organization is today, where is it actually heading, and then we can actually do some sort of what-if analysis of how much transformation do we need, how much coaching do we need, how much training do we need to actually enable that change, and more importantly, at what pace. Because everything is achievable with 2 resources if something needs to be done in 24 months' time. So this is one of the tools which we actually use to do a little bit of what-if analysis. I think the important thing here is that Agile is not a small change. Often it takes a little while, and we deal with lots of large, complex organizations, hundreds of millions of dollars and pounds worth of things which are at stake, sometimes even programs which are that big. It takes months, sometimes a couple of years, to embed that change. The important thing is the way we engage is, yes, we bootstrap, if I can use Jeff Sutherland's term here, in the first stage here, and the second stage is more on embedding these working practices. And third is where we start to give it back to the organization. We step back and for the organization to actually start to champion this internally, because one of the biggest things you would have seen in any changes, it's no good if it doesn't stick. Consultants go in, come out, and the things fall apart. Well, I wouldn't pay any consultant that sort of money to do that. And reality kicks in. This is one quick view of one of the key constraints we get quite often. Now, a lot of organizations we get into, they start with, yeah, the customer is up round about there, and then you get a big stack of requirements to deal with. Or, almost in every single setup, what we see is, yes, we can be sprinting along, we can split things into chunks, but then on the right-hand side, we get stuck. So, looking at the concept to cash life cycle, looking at the whole value stream is one of the biggest drivers for us, because that's really one key area where we think people get stuck. The bit in the middle is relatively easy, and this is where your development teams, you will find, work well. But then actually to scale up on the side, and I can already see smiles around the room, which I can see that people can resonate well with their situation here. So putting an agile team in the middle will not just help on its own. I call this the Angry Birds diagram, because there's a lot of things being thrown on the other side. So in a traditional way, what you also get quite a lot is that, yes, people look at the end-to-end, we can look at the end-to-end time, we can look at the costs. Now, what I'm, in an agile world, always looking for is not just to do things quicker, but actually to do the right things in the first place. Now, my focus tends to be around looking at the requirement set, what are we actually trying to achieve, technical releases, how can we quickly get there, and actually some level of system, what slither can we actually deliver at the end of the day, which will give us some business value quicker. So that bit in the middle, whether you're talking at a project, program, product, portfolio level, is one key focus area for me. I mean, in one of the organizations, I put a model together where we had 400 different product lines, 40 countries, and a single prioritized queue of priorities. We all knew what is the most important thing and why will it deliver the value we said it will deliver. Now, it might look on the face of it as a simple Scrum picture to you, because quite often we do get into situations, yeah, we are agile, we're doing Scrum. And hang on a minute, what's the bit feeding into you? So even on the extreme left, we start to look at the estimation models. In a lot of organizations, they still use function point estimation, and agile use story points. It doesn't work. No, it does work. We have made it work. On the right-hand side, we also bake in, what is the target operating model? What is the agile target operating model? How does your traditional roles fit in with your new agile roles? What are the KPIs we track? We don't just throw away things in the trash. And the all-important contractual model, I know there's a separate track running in the session in this conference today, it is gaining popularity. And yes, we are a system integrator. Yes, we are a supplier in a lot of cases. We would like to be partners. But in a lot of cases, we are suppliers, but still, we do not shy away from saying, yes, we can look into agile contracting. We can look at, but it's a step 8 of 10 on the agile journey. It's, unless you know where you're heading, unless you know how you've been performing. And in some sense, it's an oxymoron to say, actually, I want to be agile because I trust you. Well, actually, if you trust me, then why do you need an agile contract anyway? Let's work on the trust basis, right? Just a view on the governance side, and we again get thrown into lots of situations where, oh, well, we got the checkpoints all the way on the top. Yep, absolutely brilliant. Don't throw them away. There are good yardsticks of where we are today and how well we are doing. It's just how we approach that. Underpinning an engineering way of working led by extreme programming, sprinting along, but actually embodying a holistic, agile, lean way of working around it. This is another view from a V model. So quite often we get into situations where people are agile and they're scrumming along, but actually it's only very bottom part of the V model because the requirements are set, the release is stuck. How do we then expand out? We just make sure people get the view where you are today is just the bottom of the V model. And how do we do that? Quite often we use a set of agile enablers. So there's a lot on that slide. Now, this is one of the models which we use quite often, where we're using a mix of Agile, Scrum, XP, and Lean. Now, why is it important for me to call it out? I have been in organizations where I've led large teams. How do I do the recruitment? I mean, I can have help and support from consulting companies, build the capability within. But what if I need to hire people? And people hire Scrum Masters and they say, no, you're not doing Scrum. People hire Lean experts, you're not doing Lean. So we need to be very, very clear, and we are very clear on what aspects of each of the methods we are using. Underpinning a lot of good practice around collaboration, good enough, visibility, bog standard things which should come as a part of it, but we still call it out. And the more important thing is we operate at least at these 3 levels, where yes, there's a development, how quickly can we get things out there, but then there's the project, what are we trying to achieve? With the business product, what value will it realize at the hands of the customer? Now, on the left-hand side, this is just a model showing you how we use some of the coaching, training aspects, transformation pieces, and assessment tools to benchmark the progress today and where we are heading. I think that's really, really important. Quite often, and even if you're not using any external help, I would suggest try and benchmark what are you improving, how you're improving, because once you get there, people will not look back and say, wow, that was brilliant. And if, God forbid, you didn't get there, people will be the first ones to point out, you didn't change anything, you burnt all this money, what have you delivered? So it's really important to benchmark the key performance indicators and how do you improve that. A lot of that detail is available on our stands, we've got material around that, so I wouldn't go into too much detail here.
Okay, so I'm just going to wrap this up now very quickly and just through 3 slides. The first is just a quick reminder of the kind of journey that we've gone on. I'll try to take you with us over the last few tens of minutes. We started off talking about really some fundamental challenges, the way industries are being restructured. We then talked about some of the benefits that you can derive both from technology sets such as social mobile analytics and cloud, as well as from frameworks and methodologies such as Agile. But equally, we've tried to kind of purport this message that it's around, there is a big agility message. It's not just around a particular framework, a particular methodology, a particular technology. It's really how do you create agile organizations that can detect and react to change and outcompete. And our perspective being that you need to be able to really think through everything from engagement to how you log an action insight, sustain innovation on long term. And if you can't collaborate across that value chain, then at the end of the day, no matter how much agile methodologies you use, I would suggest you're never going to be truly agile in your ability to respond and create value. So that was that's the high level view, a little bit of the journey we've been down. The next slide, I wanted to put this up. Actually, the first thing is I don't want to talk about TCS. That's not why I put the slide up. I thought it was interesting to ask a question to a client and say, so there was a particular project we'd worked on with them. What is it that you valued? And I think the words in bold are the ones that came out. So they were talking about they valued a bespoke agile framework, this adaptive, iterative working. But equally, they needed us to support their traditional governance. And governance is something that can get quite complicated sometimes. So they had to feel that we were able to work with them in in the way they govern their business as is. Equally, when you talk about measures, some of them are quite fluffy. This improved business and IT collaboration. A lot of senior execs quite rightly get very excited about that. It's when people collaborate that they start getting, the value is greater than the sum of the parts. But equally, there were certain measures around employee productivity and, very simply, their wording, better, bigger, and cheaper products and services. So those are some of the things that they seem to value out of it. If you'd like to read a little bit more about certainly some of the transformation thought leadership, then I'd encourage you to go to www.tcs.com, which is clearly our homepage, and there's a /perspectives. There's loads of quite interesting thought leadership and data and surveys around what we believe is driving transformation. And equally, on the TCS homepage, you can start searching for things like agile methodologies, and you'll find lots of things around our frameworks. So that's where we've come to. Thank you very much. And we'll take questions, I think.
And
later.
I think we'll be out on the stands for all day today. And I think Jonathan's here today, not tomorrow, I believe. So if you've got further questions, we're just out on the right. Feel free to come back and see us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.